Okay folks, it's time for some more 1,500 point Kings of War action. The Goblins and the Dwarves in this particular battle have long been neighbours on mountains opposite each other, and they've pretty much left each other alone because they know that any conflict would be bad for both of them really. However, that all changed when a Goblin inventor has finally innovated the telescope. The same guy that built this mincer, oddly enough, and the Dwarf Queen, because she didn't realise, of course, that the Goblins have invented the telescope, she's used to showering with the curtains wide open. So the Goblins caught a glimpse of her, and the Dwarf scouts on the towers noticed that the Goblins were having too much fun spying on her. So the Dwarf King could not stand for this, so he has led his forces down into the valley to meet the Goblin masses, to take revenge for that slight against his kingdom. So, for those highly legitimate reasons, we've got this battle going on, and because of the extreme hatred from both sides, especially the dwarves, it's all about killing each other. So it's the kill scenario. And let's start by looking at what we've got on the dwarf army. And just for a change, let's start on this side.
Berserker Brock Riders taking up the left flank. Next to those, we've got the Rangers Regiment with the Vanguard special rule. Alongside them, Heneas the Hunter.
Heneas the Heinous.
He's sort of like their captain, so hopefully back them up. Organ Gun, positioned to see most of the battlefield. We've got a horde of Ironclad with their army standard bearer behind to inspire them. Positioned strategically behind the wall, we've got the Sharpshooters in the night camo. And next to them, a unit of Ironclad and a unit of Iron Guard, 2 regiments, with the King finally on the end with his lightning bolt.
Yeah, he looks very, very angry as well, and he has every right to be. Over to the Goblins, and on this side we have the Fleabag Riders with a Brew of Strength. Moving along, we have a King on a Fleabag, and he has ensorcelled armour, so +1 to his defence. We have Sharpstick Regiment with a whiz behind them, and that whiz has Wind Blast. Then we have a horde of trolls right there. They have the Brew of Keen Eyes, so they're +1 to hit, and they have a Troll Bruiser behind them as well, so he's going to be backing them up. We have a horde of Spitters, and they have the Heart-Seeking Chant, so they're going to get piercing from that. Next to them there is a Wizard, a Wiz who has Bane Chant, next to a Mincer, and a Giant who is not looking very upright at the moment because they're standing on walls. Then we have another regiment of Sharpsticks, and a Flag Git behind those. So the Goblins won the roll for first turn and chose to let the Dwarfs go first, hoping that it would minimise the amount of shots that the Organ Gun gets during the game. But there was still a bit of shooting. The Rangers moved up a bit along with Heneas the Heinous, and the Sharpshooters. All of them took aim at the Giant, but they only managed to put 3 points of damage on him. They almost got a double 6 to waver him though, but they only managed 11. So he's fine for the moment. And it's going to be over to the Goblins. Not much action yet. Goblin turn 1, and again not too eventful. As you can see, everything is advancing up here. The Fleabag Riders, the Trolls, and the various supporting characters have moved up towards that side of the army. And this Wiz cast Wind Blast to push back that unit of Ironclad 3 inches, which is nice. Over here, the Spitters turned around a bit and had Bane Chant cast on them by that Wiz, and they fired into the Rangers and only did 1 damage on them because they had to move to get into range, so they weren't hitting quite easily. It was on 6s and they only got 1 wound in the end. These units here have set up a pretty obvious trap for the Brock Riders, so we'll see if they actually fall for that. But the way it's set up, that is pretty much textbook, come and eat my small unit. So I don't think they're going to bite unless they think there's some other benefit to that. So we'll see what the Dwarves do now. I think it's about to get very spicy because everything's starting to move into range. Dwarf turn 2. They're still being very conservative, staying back. Over on this side, the Brock Riders are staying just out of charge range of everything. They don't want to engage. They want to pepper me with shots first, which is exactly what they did. So over here, they fired into the Giant with pretty much everything on that hill, and it was horribly ineffective. They only did 2 points of damage to him. Was it the organ gun that completely missed with everything?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so very horrible shooting over there, but they did manage to heal the 1 point of damage on that unit with this standard there, so that's nice. And over here, these units haven't advanced much either, a little bit of subtle rearranging, and then the lightning bolt and the sharpshooters. I think the lightning bolt fired at the fleabags,
yeah,
and they threw some mastiffs into that unit as well. So they got them up to 5 damage, but couldn't waver them or remove them. And the Troll Bruiser took the brunt of the sharpshooters firing, I believe. So he took 3, but not enough to get rid of him. So, the Goblins, they do have some charge possibilities coming up, and you'll see precisely what I've got in mind, because it could be deemed quite sneaky. Goblin turn 2, and on this side, the Goblins weren't satisfied that the Brock Riders didn't take the bait, so they've moved everyone up to the hedge and said, okay, if you don't bring it, you're going to get charged, triple charged, even if it's hindered. I'm sure the Goblins don't mind doing that. So will the Brock Riders charge in now for a hindered charge, or are they going to sit there even longer and let the shooting have some effect? We shall see. Down here, Bane Chant was once again put onto these spitters who already have piercing. So with that double piercing and the fact they didn't move, they were able to put 7 damage onto these rangers, which leaves them wavered. And you may notice the organ guns edged back a bit. That's because the Whiz here cast Wind Blast on it and pushed it a little bit further back. The Trolls and the Troll Bruiser have moved up here, staying just out of charge range of everything, along with the King. But the sneaky moment was these Fleabag Riders charged through the dwarf lines into the sharpshooters. However, because they had an obstacle and they are defense 5 sharpshooters, only put 1 damage point on them, but that is going to be enough to stop them shooting, which is quite important, and it is tying them up. So we'll see what the dwarves do about this threat now that there are goblins in amongst them, and there is the imminent threat coming from this side as well. We'll see how they respond to that. Dwarf turn 3. So over here, a lightning bolt flew into the King. 2 points damage on him. A throwing mastiff came from this giant unit towards the Troll Bruiser. And the organ gun also shot at him, so the combined damage from that has left him wavered. I think Heneus the Heinous also fired at him as well. Over here, the sharpshooters countercharged the Fleabags, and they did enough damage because they rolled quite a lot of 6s and ended up wavering them. So that whole strategy could be going horribly wrong there. We'll see. It's still holding them up for a little while longer though. And over on this side, the Brock Riders decided, you know what, we're going to have to charge something or our army's going to get munched. So they went into the Giant. They didn't roll amazingly, they did okay. They got 3 points of damage considering it was hindered, and they lost their thunderous charge. And they couldn't roll high enough to get rid of the Giant. So they're probably going to get charged multiple times in a minute. And other than that, the Rangers couldn't do anything because they were still wavered. They failed to remove it. And it's over to the Goblins. Goblin turn 3. Let's start with this main event down here. The Brock Riders, who were charged by the Giant, and the Mincer, but the Mincer was hindered, so it loses all its thunderous charge abilities. I'll have to be careful with that in the future. And the Sharp Sticks and the Flank were also hindered. And because of the hindrances, and the Giant and the Mincer didn't roll particularly high for their attacks, and only did 9 damage, but because the Giant has Brutal, it was possible to remove them on a double 6, but couldn't quite do it. If we move down here, you'll see that the Rangers have been removed from the game. That's because the Spitters, who had the Bane Chant cast on them again, they successfully did enough damage to remove them. And the Organ Gun has moved back another inch from a Wind Blast from this Whiz, who really wants to push it off the hill so it can't fire over it anymore. But he's going to take at least another push to do it, because he didn't roll very high on his blast this turn. Troll Bruiser couldn't do anything because he was wavered. These trolls charged into this big, huge dwarf unit here. Did 5 damage to it, but couldn't roll enough to do anything to them. And the Fleabag Riders were wavered still. And over here we had a double charge with Sharp Sticks and the King into this unit of Iron Guard. And if you see there, 6 damage. That's pretty good considering these units that came in, but couldn't roll enough to do anything to them. So, a lot of successful damage done by the Goblins, but not a lot of removal, just the Rangers for now. So we'll see how the Dwarf countercharge goes in a second. I have a feeling it could be quite devastating in certain places. Dwarf turn 4, and it was quite a big one. Let's start at this end, shall we? the king and the Iron Guard combo charged my Goblin King and completely killed him, so he's gone. Further along, the Fleabag Riders had a disastrous mission into these surprisingly tough camouflaged snipers and ended up being killed by these dwarves here. Further along, now this was a bit of a disaster for the dwarves, because that huge horde could only put 1 point of damage onto the trolls, so they're going to have to pay for that in a minute, I think. Over here, the Organ Gun and Hineas the Heinous fired at the Bruiser, and he's gone. Over here, the Brock Riders countercharged the Giant. They did enough to get rid of him as well. And it should be pointed out at this stage that the dwarf damage rolls have been really, really abysmal. They've barely done any damage, but then when it comes to nerve, they've rolled exceptionally high. So we'll see how the Goblins can respond to this. It's not looking good at the moment. 4 units down. I'm confident they're going to die. We'll see what happens on this side in a minute. Goblin turn 4, and the Mincer and the Sharpstick Regiment, who have been untouched, decided they would take some sweet vengeance for their friend the Giant, and they managed to finish off the Brock Riders. Over here, the Trolls put some quite significant damage onto this horde. Couldn't quite roll enough to do anything to them. They are a horde. They're going to be pretty tough to shift still, especially being healed by that annoying chap behind them there. And this whiz popped up behind the Trolls and wind blasted those dwarves just far enough away so they're not actually going to be able to charge the Trolls in a minute, which is quite crucial, because if they'd been flank charged, this whole area could have just crumbled instantly. Over here, the perils of being a Goblin player came up because they're so yellow-bellied that they just refuse to charge into the front of that dwarf unit. They're probably right, because they're not going to do very well in that fight, but it means they're not even going to attack, so they just have to sit there doing nothing. And back here, the Spitters have just moved themselves, so hopefully they can get into the fight next turn, because their only real target over there was already dead. So they want to get a piece of this action. Not quite yet, so we're moving on to Dwarf turn 5 now. Dwarf turn 5. The combined firepower of Hineas the Heinous and the Organ Gun brought down the Mincer. Even though they're firing into the front, having a little bit of piercing on there was enough, because it doesn't stand up to much. If you can actually damage it, there's a good chance of removing it. And I think in this game so far, every time I've been inspired, it's actually made the roll worse. So I don't know what they're inspiring them with. It's obviously not very effective, so the Mincer is gone. Over here, the Horde versus the Horde, and they put a bit more damage on the Trolls, but couldn't get enough to waver them. So the Trolls are hanging in there at the moment. They better hurry up, because this unit here is poised to flank charge them if they don't finish off that unit in the next go. And over here, these Sharpsticks are wavering from the combined attacks of the King and the Iron Guard. They took 9 damage. So let's see what the Goblins can do to respond. There's not that many units left, but most of them are fairly healthy, especially this one. I'm going to have to do something with them in a minute. Goblin turn 5, and the battle is compressing quite a bit. So these Spitters moved up onto the hill. The Wiz came along and Bane chanted them. And then with those Bane chanted arrows, they put a little bit of damage onto this unit of Iron Guard, along with a lightning bolt from this whiz over here. So with all that, we managed to waver them. So that could be very crucial over there. On this side, the Sharpsticks moved up onto the hill, so they can have their choice of charges if they survive to next turn. And the Flag Git positioned himself between those two units to add a little bit of inspiring. Not that that's helped so far. And then in this combat, the Trolls did quite a bit and managed to waver this huge horde of dwarves. So they are still in danger from that unit in the flank, and they regenerated a point of damage, so they're on 3. So that flank charge could kill them. If it doesn't, then I would say it's advantage Goblins. If it does, probably advantage Dwarves at this stage. Looking at the overview, only possibly 1 turn each left. What can the Dwarves do? Because they've got a couple of wavered units, that is going to limit them a little bit. Dwarf turn 6, and the Goblins have taken more casualties. Over here, the Organ Gun and the Sharpshooters took aim at the untouched Sharpsticks regiment there, and completely obliterated it with firepower. There's just a bit of a crater there with some spears sticking out. Over here, this unit managed to pass their test, so they weren't wavered anymore, so with the King they were able to destroy that Goblin unit once and for all. This unit, thankfully, didn't pass the test, so they weren't able to help out this flank charging unit attacking the Trolls, which meant that not much damage was done, and with the help of the inspiring presence of the Flag Git, who survived in combat against Hineas the Heinous, then they are able to stick around, not even wavered, so that could be crucial. If they can get another charge in on this big horde and kill them, that's a lot of points going down. So, for the Goblins, we've got this Spitter unit here that could potentially kill something and get some points. Still got a couple of wizards around, and the Flag Git and that Troll unit are really going to have to make something happen there in that combat in order to win, I think. So the Goblins needed a big turn 6 to try and turn this around, and they got it. So, first things first, Bane Chant was cast onto these Spitters, and they managed to take out those Iron Guard, which was very, very nice indeed, which freed up the Wiz to cast a Lightning Bolt at the King, but couldn't do any damage, so was hoping for a bit of luck there, couldn't get it. Over here, the Trolls, they put huge amounts of damage into that Ironclad Horde, and they were on double 1s, and with the Inspiring, the second roll was actually a 1 and a 2, so they almost survived, but they are gone. And down here, the Flag Git countercharged Hineas just for the lols, but couldn't do anything because he hits on a 6 and he only has 1 attack. So if the game were to end now, it would be very close actually, because there's quite a few units left for both sides, so I don't know who would take it. But we're going to see if the game ends now. On a 1, 2 or 3, the game will end. Here we go. It's over. So we're going to have to calculate the scores, and then we'll get back to you and tell you who exactly has won this one, because it's too close to call right now, just at a glance. So we worked out what was remaining on the table, and it turns out that the Dwarves only have about 90 more points alive, and the requirement for a win was 150 points. So it's a draw, which, looking at the forces, seems around about right. Although if the Dwarfs had got another turn, I imagine they would have killed something. Getting the first crack at turn 7 would have been big for them. But, unfortunately for them, the game ended there, with a draw. So, extremely close. It could have gone either way at various stages. There were some excellent and terrible rolls for both sides at various points. And I think we've both got a lot to think about tactically there. The use of certain units. I'm sure if we could go back, we would have changed 1 or 2 things as well. I'm sure I would have used the Mincer differently, so it didn't have all of its combat over a hedge for a start.
I would have done the same with the Brot Riders.
Yep, we would have avoided that hedge like the plague, I think. In the middle, the Trolls, for the first time in a while, actually did something useful. I think that's the first time they've performed in a game, so proud of them. And for the Dwarves, they're shooting. Those Mastiffs were good, weren't they?
The Mastiffs are good, yeah. The Sharpshooters are good. Only 5 shots, but they seem to hit and damage with good frequency.
And they didn't go down to a cavalry charge
either.
Stood
up to a charge, yeah. So I think definitely take them in most games.
Yeah, so those Sharpshooters or the Trolls maybe as the men of the match, perhaps.
Yeah.
So, another very good and very close game. So, hope you enjoyed that, folks. Let's get the left-handed handshake in there.